Anastasia, why don't you ask him yourself? Because he's right outside.
Let's go!
Welcome, everyone. This is episode 3 of the Comics in Motion podcast. I'm Chris Phelps, and my co-host is Mr. Dave Horrocks.
Bonjour, mon ami.
It started.
With all that much about at the start, I've been sat on this, primed like a lion for the last 5 minutes to throw that one in.
If you've not listened to episode 2, Dave's impressions have gone down in Comics in Motion folklore already, because every single person who's listened to it has asked me to rewind them 2 friend segments, and not in a disrespectful way, in such a funny way. Dave, I had it on before with Sam, because she's telling me off. She's going, I'm listening to the podcast. You and Dave are giving all these stats and that. I said, how far have you listened in? And she went, I've not. And then I put that bit on and just listened to it, and she was absolutely in stitches. Oh, it's absolute one of the best things I've heard on a podcast. I kept texting you, didn't I? It was just ridiculously funny. And it's your thing of, I'm not here for me impressions, I'm here for me comic knowledge. It's like, I'm not so sure after last week, Dave. It was absolutely
Well, let's see how it goes. We might get a few more in today.
Yeah, exactly. But I just want to thank all our followers on social media. We've really gained a lot of traction last week, and it's not gone unnoticed by myself and you. And we've had a lot of interactions and questions. And one of the things that we are doing and we've been implementing over the 2 episodes is like a fun fact every day of the film, with a picture or link to something, and they've been really well received with some quite good interaction through Twitter, like different things people were aware of. A lot of it is in relation to what we mentioned on the podcast and little Easter eggs and that, but it's really, really something that we're going to carry on forward, and especially with this week's review as well, especially if it being a newer film.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been great. Can't really have asked for much more. In terms of this first couple of episodes, it's been great.
Yeah, it has. And I think we've said this, we've slightly tweaked it even from the first week last week, and then today's approach will be slightly different. But choosing them 2 films, and obviously they were older films, they were comfortable films because we knew them inside out, to sort of get the format going. And people have seemed to be up for what we're doing and the way we're approaching it. Obviously, with stuff we're watching at home at our own leisure, we can go scene by scene, which they are like the extended podcast, like the last 2 ones. This one is a film which we've watched at the cinema, so we're going off memory and a bit of stuff we've researched. So things will change each time we review, and hopefully for the better. And it seems to be getting better. I'm enjoying listening back to him, Dave. I said to you on the messages that I'm either an egomaniac or we're doing all right with these 2 podcasts.
Or a bit of both,
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and like I say, so I think we'll continue to try a few new things, and one of the things we're going to try and aim for in this episode is just keep it a little bit shorter. So yeah. we obviously really enjoy going through this, and we'll try a shorter episode, try and not make every single episode 3 hours long, but we'll see how it goes.
You said that, Dave, not me.
Yeah.
No, I agree with Dave. We've talked about it this week, and I think as well, it's one of these. We've both listened to a lot of podcasts, and if you're really into it, you're going to listen. 3 hours is a long time to listen. You can split it. Obviously, that's what I do. You do with a lot of the podcasts we listen to. But we just thought that we'd try different things as we're going, and we'll see how we go today, because it's not going to be as in-depth as what the others have been.
Yeah. So. And I guess we must be doing something well, Chris, because we've got another 5-star review.
Oh, very good.
So this one starts off excellent. So it could be from Mr. Burns, maybe. So it says, entertaining and informative. Great rapport between the 2 presenters, who clearly are passionate about subject matter, as am I, going way back. The spontaneous humour stops it from being too serious. Looking forward to the next one. Hope future ones will branch out beyond the standard DC and Marvel universe to keep it fresh and varied. And so Thanks very much for that. That's brilliant. And absolutely, we're going to start off. Obviously, we have started off in the DC, and today we're going to be doing Marvel. But absolutely, there's a ton of comic book based media out there from the other publishers, and we absolutely intend to go through some of those as well.
We've been talking privately what we're going to review in that, and we're definitely going to go down the route of reviewing, the smaller productions, whether it be, smaller comic base, which is led on to film adaptations or TV films, anything. There's no sort of boundaries to what we're doing, and we're only going to listen to what people want. People are proper comic book followers like yourself, Dave. There's a lot of stuff that even I haven't got a clue about or don't know about, and even film adaptations. So I'm looking forward to getting into it and discussing it and reviewing them. Yeah,
and I think some of them you'll probably be surprised. There's quite a lot of movies in particular out there which are based on comic books, which you'd probably never even realise they were. Things like The Mask, things like The Losers. So we'll be doing all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I said to Dave last week, if we don't do, I found a picture, and I'm still trying to get this as a review, but if we don't do a review of Davy Brent, then I'm sorry. I found one comic book strip of him. That surely must go under the banner, Dave.
I think we've got to find a way to crowbar him in some way, haven't we? Even if we publish our own comic, it's going to have to be done at some point.
I don't mind. I can draw a mean cartoon character. We have to do something to get him in there. He's mine and Dave's all-time comedy heroes. So we've got to, we have to have artistic license when we pull that one. How we're going to justify that to the listeners, I don't know. But somewhere down the line, he'll be coming in.
Maybe that'll be a bonus episode, possibly.
It might have to be a thing.
So one of the other things we talked about was we talked right at episode 1 that we were going to try and think about the type of rating system that we were going to use. And so what we've come up with, and again, this could always evolve, but what we're going to start off with is a 5-point system, but based on places in and around the comic book universes. So we're going to start off, I'll start top to bottom. So if something is absolutely great, we definitely recommend that's a top movie or TV show or game of its kind, then that'll be in Asgard. That'll be a kind of heavenly score for us. And then we have Asgard's very much in the Marvel universe. We then have, if it's not quite at that standard, we then have Atlantis, which actually appears in both DC and Marvel universes because it's a fairly old concept there, so neither's got exclusive licenses over that. If it's bang on in the middle, we're going to use the Hall of Justice, which, of course, if you're a Super Friends fan, you'd be familiar with. And then we're getting down to the bottom. So if it's below that, we'll go to Hell's Kitchen. And then finally, reserved for such things. Actually, I'm not going to spoil which ones I'd put there. But if this is something that really shouldn't be watched by human beings, then we'll send that off to the Phantom Zone. So we may
before Zod. Yeah, I like that.
Tweak those. And they may only be to be released by hydrogen bombs in the future, but this is where we're going to start. So we'll go ahead and do our review, and then this is the scoring system or the rating system that we're going to be using for that.
Dave, can I just ask one thing? If we do give a 1 out of 5 Phantom Zone, please can you do the French impressions when you do the review? Oh my God. You've got to. Absolutely amazing. Amazing. But no, it's a great system, to be fair, Dave, because it was you who'd said that regarding Atlantis this week when we were discussing. Because I know we said the first one, so many capes and all that, and that was a great system. But by doing it this way, we're not favouring any comic book, DC or Marvel. I mean, it's all in the middle, all straight down the middle. So I'm quite happy with that system. And if people listening or get in contact with us on Twitter or by the email, then obviously we can change it if it makes more sense. It's just something we're trying out.
Yep. So should we get in today's review?
Of course.
And then we should absolutely say, so we didn't really spell it out at the start. With them being 40 plus years old movies, we didn't start off the podcast by stating that there's going to be spoilers, but this is a more recent movie. Yeah. So we're going to be reviewing Black Panther, and we are absolutely going to spoil the hell out of this one. And so if you haven't seen it, then hit stop. Get yourself off to the cinema, get yourself to watch that movie, watch it, and then come back and have a listen through. Yeah,
I agree. It's going to be an interesting one, this, because as I said before you introduced which film we were doing, to sort of remember it and review it by just the cinema is going to be an interesting concept, because I've done that where you go to cinema and you get carried away by the sound, the screen, everything. A lot of films are actually portrayed a lot better for the big screen. So I'm interested to see how we come up with both our scores and what we both sort of picked out of it, what we can remember, because we've only watched it once, both of us.
Yeah, and they don't like you pausing it too much in the or rewind. Bad French accents.
No.
Everyone gets pretty upset. Okay, so should we go into a bit of comics background?
Yep.
Okay, great. So Black Panther actually first came out in Fantastic Four 52 back in July 1966. And he was actually the first black superhero in mainstream comics. Now, there was actually a black character who came out a little bit before that, kind of late 1965, a chap called Lobo, who was kind of a cowboy. So it's like a Western type comic. But actually, black superhero in mainstream comics, Black Panther's the man. And he was created by a fairly legendary team of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And I actually wondered, so obviously you'll know who Stan Lee is, Chris, but have you heard of Jack Kirby before?
No, and I'll be honest with you, Dave, only until I was researching this film today, I purposely stayed away. I knew who the Black Panther was because of watching the cartoons, and he's popped up in the odd cartoon when I was a kid, and then from the last couple of years from the, Captain America and that, but I didn't actually know who had created him or anything like that. So, but I researched him this morning. I said to you, I was going blank into the film, so I didn't know anything about the origins or anything properly. And then when I was researching, I come across this guy, because obviously Stan Lee's always accredited with everything, everything to do with Marvel these days. And the fact, obviously a lot of it's to do with the fact that he's still alive as well, so that he's still acknowledged, and he's like the grandfather of Marvel now. But no, so I'd never heard of him until this morning. Yeah,
so, to us comic nerds, Jack Kirby's an absolute legend. And Stan Lee, to me at least, and a lot of people, Stan Lee's a legend as well. But he was pretty good at taking the credit from what other people had done. And that's not to say that Jack Kirby deserves more credit than Stan Lee does, or Stan Lee deserves more credit than Jack Kirby does. What you had essentially was Stan Lee in those early Marvel days, so those early 60s, early to mid 60s time. He basically had various artists. So Steve Ditko was another artist, and he was the guy who did Spider-Man initially. And what they developed is a thing called the Marvel method. Now, with comics, the traditional way is to have your script. And so script that all out, and then each box, you tell the artist, well, this is what's going to happen here. Next panel, this is what's going to happen here. And the artist tries to draw it. And the way Stan Lee's described it is, he had all these artists working for him. And as a writer, he couldn't keep up. So what he came up with was this way of working, which was basically he'd have a very rough idea of what the story is. This is how it's going to start. These are the characters. This is where it's going to evolve, and this is where it's going to end. But very, very, very broad. And then kind of left it up to the artists to work it out for themselves. But Stan was still the writer in theory. Yeah. So I think it has been a little bit contentious, about who actually created certain characters and what have you. Where should all the credit go? But it is interesting because, like you say, a lot is to do with the cameos that he makes in the movies now. But yeah, there's a lot of really talented artists, and Jack Kirby is regarded as one of those iconic artists who really shaped that whole Marvel universe.
Yeah.
Now, Jack Kirby did actually come up with the first iteration of the character, and he drew him up and he called him the Cold Tiger, which to me sounds a little bit like something Homer Simpson might come up with. It's, again, this is the 60s, so it's a very, very different time. And I should say it was fairly radical, for them to even entertain having a black guy as the main character, as the main superhero there.
Yeah.
So really quite forward thinking. And so, in collaboration with Stan Lee, they came up with this concept of the Black Panther. Now, later that year, later in 1966, there was also a rather famous Black Panther political party as well, which was formed. Now, they didn't copy the name off each other. It's just one of those coincidences. And they were probably influenced by other things that were going on at the time. But to try and distance themselves, Marvel's try and distance themselves from that. They actually changed his name for a very short time to Black Leopard.
Yeah, I've read that.
It didn't really stick, and so it very quickly sort of went back into it. So, but yeah, it's really challenged the kind of stereotypes that were around there. You were talking about, this nation of Wakanda that was very rich. You were talking about someone who was, really technologically advanced as well, up against Reed Richards, this Western white guy who we're kind of thinking he's the top of his tree. And then Black Panther comes along and he kind of finds out, well, he's not. And so he sort of paved the way for, characters like Luke Cage, I'm sure you're familiar with now, Falcon, who's been in some of the movies as well.
Yeah.
And, so he's been in and around. He's remained that kind of ruler in Wakanda for most of the time. But, he does venture across to New York and kind of hangs out with the Avengers occasionally. Something that I don't think it's a spoiler, or if it is, it's probably 20 years away or something. But in recent times, he was actually married to Aurora Monroe. Does that name ring a bell at all?
Is it Rogue or Storm?
Close. Storm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not completely inconceivable with Disney taking over Fox, but, that could happen in the future.
That'd be an interesting crossover, because the X-Men have not been in any of these crossover films. Obviously, I know some of it's to do with Sony, again, a bit like Spider-Man, but they're not even acknowledged in any of the films. And obviously in the cartoons, there was some of the crossovers, especially the Black Panther. He was in all sorts, wasn't he? Fantastic Four. He's even, I was reading some of that, he was even took over from Daredevil in Hell's Kitchen for a while.
That's right. He became the Man Without Fear. There was a mini-series called Shadowland, where Daredevil basically, he was possessed and then needed a bit of time off, and you're right, and Black Panther essentially came in, and he was based in Hell's Kitchen for a while.
Well, that would be an interesting film.
Yeah, and with the X-Men in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if only we had some universe, big universe bending crossover type film coming out in April this year.
Which I saw yesterday, and the trailer looks tremendous.
It does, doesn't it? So who knows? We could see those X-Men in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the future. Yeah, but anyway, so in terms of recommended reading, so we talked on the last show. I'd kind of try and look at that. So obviously, I mentioned Fantastic Four 52. I think it's always handy to go back and look at the very first appearance, because seldom does that end up being the same character that later on. But it's always interesting to go back. There's Jungle Action Comics 6 to 18. Now, this is actually a story arc called The Panther's Rage, and a lot of the movie is based on this story. If you're gonna go back and read something, now that's an early 70s comic. So what you find with the older comics, they are very, very dense, a lot of words to the page. But like I say, in terms of if you want to get more about the movie, then then there's a place to go. The place I think I'd recommend you start, Chris, is probably there's a story called "Who is Black Panther?" back in, I think it was the mid 2000s, 2006-ish, and it was part of a branch of Marvel called Marvel Knights, where they started trying to just get back to writing great stories. So they were very bogged down in continuity and the mainstream. And then they started off a few other comics, like Black Panther, and the art is fantastic in it. It's a nice self-contained story. That'd be the place I think I'd start.
No, well, I am looking. I have actually looked at the stuff you recommended last week, but again, I've got bookmarks on my computer, but not actually done anything with them. So I need to go back on, obviously, the Superman stuff and all this. I definitely want to look at the Black Panther origin stuff. Definitely. I mean, a bit more meat on the bones of the film as well for me.
If you're struggling for time, let's put it that way. That miniseries that I just talked about there is actually, a lot of the art and the story from it is used in a motion comic. Yeah. So I'm sure if you do a quick search on YouTube,
you'll find it. Yeah,
you can find that. And it's, to me, I'm not sure I'm fully bought into what a motion comic is, but that's something you could potentially look at for 2 minutes, and then if it doesn't resonate, then absolutely go to the comic. Okay, Chris, do you want to tell us a bit about the movie?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'd said to you, I've gone in blind on this film, but I've done a bit of research this morning and a bit last night when I come back from the film, because obviously it was fresh in my mind. The original idea for a film was sort of born around about 1992. Good old Wesley Snipes had sort of canvassed himself for the role of playing Black Panther, and this was sort of like around Passage of 57 time, a few of the other films he'd done where he'd got a lot of press and a big sort of following, and then he came and it never really bore fruit really as a role for him. But then he got Blade, and obviously Blade is a great series of films. I absolutely love the Blade films. Mm-hmm. And after Blade, he wanted to do Black Panther again. But they wouldn't let him do it because he said, "Look, you're synonymous with playing Blade, and it's within the Marvel universe. There's going to be some sort of crossover." I mean, it doesn't really matter now because you look at people like Captain America and that, and it's the same person, who's been in there. And obviously, even Killmonger was in the Fantastic Four. So, times have changed, going back to, 15, 16 years when he wanted to play the role. So the sort of pre-production stuff has been in planning for nearly 25, 26 years for this movie. It's just every time they've gone to make it, it's never came off for one reason or another. And then obviously this one's directed by Ryan Coogler, who's won all sorts of awards really for his directing. And he took with him in this one Michael B. Jordan. Michael B. Jordan's obviously out of Creed, which Ryan Coogler directed. And every major film he's done, Michael B. Jordan has been in as one way or the other, whether it be a major part or a small role. He's obviously someone he trusts to produce the goods and stuff. But this has become like the highest grossing film in history which has ever been directed by an African American. So it's sort of trailblazing, really, and quite rightly. It's about time it's took this long for something like this to happen, and he's getting the prestige and the sort of achievements that he should. I won't be surprised if this not have a Golden Globe or an Oscar for something like this.
And I think one of the things I'd heard before I'd even watched the movie, a lot of people were raving about it and as being one of the best Marvel movies that's come out. And certainly, I think there's a different flavour to it all, isn't it? From what had come out before. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, see, there's more acting in it, I found. Obviously, we're going to get into the review, but I found that the dialogue was actually pretty good on this one. They weren't sort of playing it by numbers like a lot of the other films.
Yeah, and we'll get into it in the review, but I think there was a few other quite radical things in there as well. But I won't talk about them now. We'll wait till we get into the review.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, should we get into it then?
Let's go.
Okay, so I think one of the first things I'd like to say, because I think in the first couple of episodes, I can't remember if it was one or two, I made a bit of a point of saying, well, I get a bit cold sometimes with the DC universe, because they have these made up places, like Metropolis, which we all know is really New York. And of course, with this opening, we get introduced to the world, or the country rather, of Wakanda. I call it the world because it kind of is a whole world within a country. This doesn't leave me cold. And I think the difference, I would say, is it's not doing a kind of Indiana Jones swapping in and out. You kind of know it's New York, but we'll call it Metropolis. This is a fictional nation with a whole rich history to it. And I actually think the filmmakers did a pretty good job in those opening title scenes of introducing us to that whole world of Wakanda, a bit of the history about it. Why is it rich? How are they concealed from the world? And it is a fairly insular nation. And again, in the comics, in the Marvel universe, there are other examples. You have Latveria, which is somewhere that Doctor Doom runs in Eastern Europe. And of course, in the cinematic universe, in the Age of Ultron, we had Sokovia, didn't we?
Yes, yeah.
So I thought I'd just be transparent with that in this case for Wakanda, I absolutely love the job that they did there in helping us understand this fictional country and really bring it to life on the screen. So what did you make of that opening sequence, Chris?
To be honest, the whole scene and the way it was made up was fantastic, to be fair, especially on the cinema screen. It was jaw-dropping. And I think, and I'm not just exaggerating there, I think what you said is a very good point. I think the problem that you have with something like Metropolis and that as a believable thing is they're actually using New York sort of points of interest and tourist places and buildings and objects. Other than the name, it's New York. So I understand where you're coming from with this. It's a totally different world. It's a nation. It has to be a different name for that whole sort of elusiveness of where they are. And obviously, on the outset, it's Africa, but they're within, within the bloody forest and mountains, aren't they? In that, which they have to because of what's happened and worried about the world getting their hands on, the metal and everything. So no, I'm quite happy with that. I think it had to be what it was, but the actual whole inception of that first couple of scenes were very, very good. Really, really nicely put together. And I thought the whole sort of cultural difference of like the African nation and everything, and even with the technology stuff was really well explained. So I have no problem with that.
Yeah, and I think it's a theme right through the movie, because they do a decent job in the comics, obviously, as well. But actually seeing it there on the big screen, and creating this fictional place where they've took so much from that African, the African tribal kind of culture, and then meshed it with all the high tech stuff. I just thought it was absolutely brilliant all the way through the film. I thought the set design, the costumes, it was just amazing.
Yeah, and I think in some respects it's sending a message to people everywhere, really, because you see Africa as a third world country, but what it's sort of saying is actually we're the most advanced nation in the world for technology, but on the outside we still look like, because you see the ladies and they're still farming and we're working in the fields with the families, with the husbands and that, and the moving the cattle around and things like that. And I think that whole way they did it, it's like a serious undertone to the whole thing, really. Looks can be deceiving sort of thing.
Yeah,
and I enjoyed it. I did enjoy all that, and that sort of building that history and quick backstory of what the Black Panther's all about and the nation and the sort of beliefs, and that was really, really well put together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but then we get a flashback, don't we? We go into 1992, and we get to see. So the Black Panther, as we know it, T'Challa. We get to see his dad, and he's across there in New York, so T'Chaka. And do you want to take us a little bit through that, Chris?
Yeah, so obviously we pan to this apartment block. It's very much, the rap music on. That these guys are obviously planning some sort of heist. So they come into the apartment, and they've stolen the vibranium and give this away to obviously the character played by Andy Serkis. And he then realises that the guy who's with him is obviously working for T'Chaka, which we find out later on is Forrest Whitaker at a young age. And from there, he's obviously banished back to Wakanda because of what he's done, and he's absolutely petrified. And as the dialogue goes on, you then realise properly, as I've mentioned, it's his brother.
Can I just jump in there as well?
Yeah.
I thought the whole lifting the lip down, so having the kind of luminous tattoos, I thought it was a really fantastic effect. I haven't seen that anywhere in the comics.
I was going to ask you that. That's sorry to interrupt. That's one thing I was going to ask. Was something in the comic?
It could be. I haven't read all the Black Panther comics, so it could be. But I think that's probably made up for the movie, and I thought it was a really cool effect.
Yeah, and I think as well it was a good little double cross by the young Forrest Whitaker, because you sort of thinking he's together, and then all of a sudden he reveals that he's from obviously Wakanda as well, and he's working for T'Chaka. So I think it's that whole scene sets it up nicely, because you've got that sort of modern feel America, and then they go to obviously back to Wakanda then to the next scene.
And I must admit, I mean, because we'd been introduced to T'Chaka, hadn't we? So he died during Civil War.
Yeah.
And when they went back to 1992, that for you and I, it doesn't seem that long ago.
No.
But obviously, old T'Chaka's had a rough life, hasn't he? Because he's aged a lot in between 92 and 2018. So,
about 50 years, I think.
Yeah, that occurred to me. I mean, he looked, probably early 40s or something, and then, he looked about 80s when he his vlog. So,
well, to be fair, I thought they did a young T'Chaka was cast very well. I actually thought it looked like T'Challa, obviously to the modern day Black Panther, he looked just pretty much like him. It was a very, very good bit of casting. But I must admit, that's the one thing, Dave, I'd written down here was, how old did he go in them 26, 27 years? 26 years. It was a hell of a transformation. I understand he's supposed to be an older man, but the way he looked later on in the film, he literally must have been nearly 50 years old in 92, and there was no way he was 50 years old.
Yeah.
So that was one bit of sort of continuity that I picked up on, which I wasn't sure about.
So after that scene, what we get is an introduction to T'Challa. So you can see he's actually just getting ready to go on a mission by the looks of it.
Yep.
And this reminded me quite a lot of Captain America: Winter Soldier, actually. In the opening scenes of that movie, you've got a conversation between Captain America and the Black Widow. And he just sort of jumps out of the plane, doesn't he, with no parachute?
Yeah.
And this seemed quite like that to me. And so there's a conversation between T'Challa and Okoye, who's played by Denai Guerrilla, if I've pronounced that right, who's, of course, Michonne from The Walking Dead. And a running theme seems to be in the early part of the movie, at least, that, don't freeze. It's like, I never freeze.
Yeah.
But of course, you see all the women who are in and around his close entourage. It's a running gag. Did he freeze? So I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah, and that was the first bit of humour in the film, to be fair, because there's some very good one-liners in the film, and that's the first bit. 'Cause he was very serious up to that point in the whole film, and there's always, with the Marvel stuff, there's always a nice bit of humour in it, but it wasn't, Superman levels of slapstick, but it was just enough, because there's a few bits in the film where I was laughing out loud at some of the one-liners. I thought they were really, really well put together. Yeah,
this isn't quite someone's ice cream blowing off or someone's wig blowing off, is it? There's a nicely placed humour, I think.
yeah, very, very good humour. And then obviously this is all around that scene's all around him getting sort of ordained as the king then, isn't it? Once after he's sort of attacked and got his girlfriend he's got back, hasn't he, for using that convoy.
That's right, yeah. So they rescue the girls who are obviously getting taken off, and again they're all having a bit of a laugh that he did freeze. Which I thought was a bit harsh,
Yeah.
more paused a bit. But yeah, then we get, his official coronation, I guess we'd call it. And again, I just thought this whole scene was fantastic. I was a bit concerned about the health and safety. When you had lots of people up the mountain there, and there's no handrails or anything, but they're dancing around as part of the whole ceremony where he's going to get pronounced the Black Panther. And you kind of see that one of the things about Wakanda, so you obviously have the ruler, the Black Panther.
Yeah.
But you have lots of tribes within Wakanda. And actually, anyone can actually go and challenge the Black Panther. And so what you kind of see is that it's usually a bit of a gimme. It's a bit of a walkover. So, it's just to buy the numbers. Yep, we're not going to challenge. We're not going to challenge. And then we get introduced to the man-ape, M'Baku.
Yeah.
And what a specimen he is. You wouldn't want to be in his shoes, would you?
No.
Up against that. But I thought this was a good storytelling device, wasn't it? Because he's got the power of the Black Panther, but as part of the ceremony, you see he's removed of that. And I guess it's kind of like, it's our Wakandan super soldier serum, basically. And so, he has to take that away. There's a bit of drama. I don't think there was a single second where I actually thought he was going to lose that fight.
No.
But it just becomes more important as the movie goes on, doesn't it?
Yeah, what I took from that was one thing I found interesting with it, especially a lot of the Marvel stuff now and these comic book things, is as someone who, this is going slightly off, but that fight scene with M'Baku, I thought was really well put together because he actually finishes him in the fight and gets him to sort of submit. He's actually doing MMA. And as someone who does MMA now, I do it at a low level. But what they've done is in a lot of the films is you can't get away. Like years ago, I grew up, and you probably did, Dave, at the old Bruce Lee, Van Damme, swift kick to the head, and he took 4 people out in a pub or whatever, in a club.
Did the splits a couple of times, yeah.
Yeah, it
looked
doesn't.
fancy.
Yeah, exactly. But in the reality, even karate and that's no disrespect to people who do karate and that, because it is a martial art. You can take someone's head off. But the way they've done it, anybody who practices MMA and he's well-rounded can take anybody down. If they're just like a boxer, they could beat a boxer if they're, so the way they've done it is very, very clever. And that whole fight scene and the way he gets him to tap, it was almost a UFC fight. Obviously it's choreographed, and I thought he was very clever as he was leaning over the waterfall ready to drop, but he had him in like a crucifix, it's called submission. And I think the whole way they've done that, and in a lot of the new superhero films, I think it all started with like The Dark Knight, really, that sort of proper realistic fighting is so well put together. I was really impressed with what they did. Because if you look at it now to what we reviewed over the last couple of weeks, and you've got 2 people chasing or 3 people chasing Superman then and getting him in like a bear hug or something, you know what I mean? And he's like throwing them. It's not really realistic, is it? But you accept it for what it is because it's a 40-year-old film. But looking at this now, what they've done, the evolution of these fight scenes is so well put together. You've got a bit of, it's just basically these fight scenes at MMA, and as a fan, as you know, I was very, very impressed with it. But I must admit, like you said, you knew that. The one thing I found with this film is I struggled because it was very, very similarities to what we'd reviewed last week in Superman 2, where he loses his powers by choice. Obviously, it's to do with the ceremony, then he gets it back. And I knew straight away from the get-go that was going to have a part in the film, if that makes sense. I know I'm not ruining for later on, but some of the bits of the film I thought were played by numbers, if that makes sense, because you sort of knew. It doesn't take away from the acting and the set pieces of that at all, but these sort of things I knew. It was great to watch, and I was on the edge of my seat, but I knew, like you said, you knew it was too early in the film to sort of accept that he was going to get a good kicking sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. I hadn't made any connection at all to Superman 2, but you're right. I mean, there's only so many stories that can be told, isn't there? In multiple ways. But actually, you're right. It follows similar kind of beats to Superman 2, doesn't it? In terms of losing losing their powers and then having to get it back and having a showdown.
Yeah. And obviously, I'm not skipping too far in front on the film, but that's what I got from it. And obviously, he's getting healed from the fight, and he has to take the heart-shaped herbs. And what's the name of that again, Dave?
I think it is heart-shaped herb. It's very cryptic. No, there's not some. So I think the only code word, if you like, is just vibranium.
Ah, right. Okay. So it's obviously he takes that, gets his powers back. They cover him up, and then obviously But what I had a problem with that scene was he then goes into, he's in like a field somewhere in Africa, and there's these panthers on a tree, and then one of them obviously is his dad. He comes alive from the panther, and he's talking to him. And I thought that whole setting was great, but the problem I had was the CGI, because you could clearly see it was a green screen job. I thought the whole background to it looked terrible. It was. I just thought it was really poor. I didn't think the scene was poor. I thought the scene had a lot of credence and a lot of importance to the film, because it's about him believing in himself and and being the king and all that. And that dialogue was really good with his dad. And I thought the guy who played his dad was a very good actor, to be fair. I thought the whole delivery of what he did was really good, but I just felt that the background was very sort of, I don't know, it just seemed really dated. I don't know whether you picked up on that.
Yeah, I couldn't. I don't know enough about the effects to know exactly what it is that's going wrong there. But it didn't. It just didn't seem quite right, did it?
No, it looked like he was trying to be a dream sequence, I think, and it was that sort of him and his dad are so focused on the camera, and the camera was really on him, so it's obviously giving like a blur effect in the background. But it just didn't look right to me. I don't know why. I couldn't work out what it was.
Yeah, and I think when I was watching this scene, it didn't resonate with me quite as much as it does at the end.
Yeah,
and so I won't kind of go to the end yet. We're not making it that quick today, but I think at this point in the story, so the character does have growth. I think that's the key thing for me, at least. So at this point, he doesn't know how is he going to fill his father's shoes, because basically he's just put his father up on a pedestal. How can I be as good a leader as you? And I just don't know, because he sees him as being pretty much perfect, doesn't he?
Yes. Yeah. And see, and obviously they have this dialogue, it comes out of it, and then the next scene, I thought, Dave, I don't know about you, was probably one of the best scenes in the whole of the film, was the proper introduction. We'd had a bit of dialogue, proper introduction of his sister, Shuri, who was obviously she's one of the most pivotal characters in the film. And to be fair, I actually thought she stole the whole film, really, with her dialogue and sort of one-liners she was throwing in there.
Absolutely. I mean, you took the words out of my mouth there. For me, at least, she absolutely stole the show. And that's not to take away. I think there are some really, really good performances in this. But, going into it, I knew Michael B. Jordan was going to be great. Fantastic Four, the latest reboot. I didn't think much of that movie, but I thought he was great in it. I thought he was great in Creed. So I come in, and he was great in this. And there's no... he hasn't exceeded or fell below my expectations. I expect greatness from him, and I think that's what I got. But I didn't know anything about this actress. I know a little bit about Shuri from the comics.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think this is going to spoil future movies. They may go this way, they may not. But she actually spends a little bit of time as the Black Panther. So there's a period when T'Challa steps down and she actually steps in. And I thought at one point, I think it might have been during this scene, or maybe it was later when she was doing the whole white Panther suit. I thought we might get a bit of that, but we don't. But I completely agree with you, Chris. I thought Shuri was brilliant.
I did, and the one thing I liked about it, and also there was a couple of bits in the film from this point, and I don't know if you want me to lead into this, but they go into the room with all the technology, and it becomes more and more apparent how technologically advanced they are as a nation, and what they, can produce and things like that. And genuinely, this whole scene was just like, all I was waiting for was Roger Moore to turn up. It was just the 007 Q and James Bond all over again. He starts messing around with the stuff. He kicks the suit. He then kicks him, and and obviously the kinetic energy just, the whole thing was just James Bond to me.
It was, and in other movies they've used that similar theme, haven't they? In Kingsman they've done that kind of background gadget guy theme. Yeah. They have done it multiple times. I seem to remember even, was it Van Helsing? I think they had something similar.
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought James Bond as well. I'll kind of forgive it that. I must admit, one of my favourite bits in the movie is when he kicks the Panther suit over. And Shuri's kind of like, "Oh, what are you doing?" As if it's a massive surprise. Knowing that it's built up all this kinetic energy, it's like, just try it again. But hold on, let me get my phone ready.
yeah.
And then straight away he's like, delete that.
Yeah, he says delete. I thought, no, Dave, I'm not slating it for that at all. I just thought it was so funny because it was like a homage to James Bond, the way it was done, but the humour. She just was, honestly, she's called Letitia Wright, isn't she? She's actually a British actress. She's amazing in it, absolutely. And I honestly think it'll lead on to a lot of things. We're going to be hearing a lot about her because as an actress and just the comedy timing of obviously it's all to do with the writers as well for giving her the sort of dialogue and the way to deliver it. But the whole thing was brilliant. That whole scene was excellent. She was just she was actually pivotal. That's in the She was actually pivotal, Dave. I made that one up. She was actually pivotal to the whole film in the end because if she hadn't been in it and delivered the way she did, I don't think it would have been as an enjoyable film.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a couple of things, I guess. One is you're kind of looking at her lab and you're thinking, well, Tony Stark looks a bit like a relic now, doesn't he? You compare the Black Panther suit to the Iron Man suit and, it seems kind of clunky and not nearly as advanced. So I think that's what they were trying to tell us as well. These guys really are technologically really advanced from what we've seen before.
Yeah, and I've read as well, though, that obviously the actual Vibranium is actually what they use for Captain America's shield, but then also there's homage to it in the Avengers because the ship is actually made by the Wakandans as well. It's not much, you think it's Tony Stark, but the actual technology is not by. So introducing the Black Panther when they did, I think they had to really because these little nodes to his universe. He's probably one of the most important people, really, technology-wise, more than Tony Stark. But it's only sort of now that we're getting to sort of find this out in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, and it's been a little bit of time since I've seen Age of Ultron, but obviously that Vibranium played a big part in that story as well. That's where they introduced the Claw character, and that's what Ultron was trying to get hold of to kind of rebuild himself with. Yeah,
really good, really good.
But the second thing I was going to say, and I sort of hinted at it at the start of the show in terms of being what I thought was pretty radical. Obviously, having this black superhero being the most prominent character, but the amount of female, strong female characters there were in this show, I think was absolutely fantastic. We've seen it from, like I say, the Denai character, from Shuri as well, from his ex-girlfriend, from his mum. I thought it was brilliant. You don't often see quite so many female characters, strong female characters, playing such a prominent role.
No, exactly. And I did, and I think it's Florence Kasumba who plays it. Io, the main. Isn't she the main security to the Black Panther, the one with the sword and stuff and the staff? She's such a good character and so strong as well, and all the fighting scenes as well. It's just like you do not mess with that woman. She's totally took names there in some of them fight scenes. It's really well choreographed, I thought.
Yeah,
but really
absolutely.
believable as sort of like an angry, loyal soldier to the throne, because obviously she's torn at one point. I just thought the way it was done, and it's all to do with the Black Panther. He's got all the female sort of army with him and that, and I thought that whole collection and the loyalty to him was just brilliant. As much as he's like the main character and he can, take on anybody, he still needs that backup with him. And they weren't just a backup in some of the scenes. I thought they stole the scene. Some of the fighting was brilliant.
So yeah, Okai is she's the head of what they call the Dora Milaje, and they're really they're like the Wakandan Secret Service almost, only not really secret, more like the Imperial Guard, say.
Yeah,
and like you say, they really do. They kick some ass, in terms of the comics, but definitely in terms of this movie as well. There's no doubt, they all hold their own, and they don't have the Black Panther super soldier serum or, the heart-shaped herb. So, yeah, really, really impressive. And I thought the movie did a good job of projecting what they are in the comics as well.
Yeah, I did. They're really believable as well, which is good. Obviously, we go to the next scene, and that's with Michael B. Jordan in the museum, looking at the artifacts. And then I must admit, Dave, I struggled a little bit with some of his dialogue, Michael B. Jordan's. Not his performance, because he's absolutely shredded and believable as like a horrible, he's been turned sort of thing because of what's happened to his father and that. And, he wants revenge on the family and all that. But I found some of the dialogue was a bit cliched from this point on when he was introduced properly. I thought Andy Serkis was underused, really. He's a great character in this. He's like a foil for the Black Panther, but they seem to just sort of get rid of him. And isn't he actually quite an important figure in the comics?
Yeah, so I guess let's talk about Michael B. Jordan first. So I thought his performance was brilliant in the movie. I can see what you're saying, though, about this opening British Museum scene. It seemed a bit odd that, one of the experts would... just wander over, and he seemed a bit abrasive, didn't he? So again, I was wondering how he got that meeting in the first place. But yeah, I mean, Andy Serkis. So most people probably know him more from his motion capture stuff, wouldn't they? Obviously, Gollum was his first major breakthrough in that world, but most recently he was Snoke, wasn't he, in Star Wars?
Yeah, and Planet of the Apes, stuff like that, and all sorts.
Yeah, he's the main guy there, wasn't he? So, really, actually seeing him, in the flesh, so to speak, I was pretty impressed. I mean, he does a good act of a pretty mad, distasteful South African, doesn't he?
yeah, really good. I think where he moves though. Because obviously what he's done in the other films where he's got to play animals and he's got to use his body to portray emotions and stuff. I thought the way he was, even though he's only small in height, his character looked so powerful for them scenes that he was in it. He looked really menacing and that. And very, very underrated actor, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, you wouldn't mess with him, would you?
No.
Just that bit of crazy about him, almost like a Joker-like crazy, where you just wouldn't put anything past him. No. But in terms of the comics, I mean, Claw, I think when I started reading, he was mostly, I mostly saw him in Avengers comics, but he does have origins way back to that kind of early Fantastic Four, Black Panther crossover. In the comics, he actually kills off T'Chaka.
Yeah.
And so, now, again, could they go this way in the movies? Who knows? But in the comics, at some points, he's actually just made up of sound. He kind of leaves his mortal coil and he travels around just as sound. So they've kind of killed him off in this, but it's comic-based media, isn't it? So they could always bring him back.
Yeah, they can do anything, can't they? A couple of little ointments here and a stitch there, and he would be back in the next film. So yeah, I can live with that. Yeah, I do. I just think he's a good character, and obviously the next scene from there is, they realise that these, the Black Panther realises that there's going to be some sort of meeting because they've stolen this vibranium sort of. It's like a vibranium pick. It's like a pick, isn't it? Vibranium pickaxe.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's going to be sort of exchanged. Now, Dave, I'll hold my hands up here. I have got a massive issue with this next scene in a couple of ways. This for me, it's sort of, I don't know what it was, but it just turned me slightly. I know obviously you about to say love the film, but I had a big issue with this next scene.
Uh-huh.
Now, have you seen Skyfall, James Bond?
I have. I can't remember that much about it.
Well, there's a scene in Skyfall that was very reminiscent of this scene when they go to Asia. And when they go into obviously this sort of underground bar thing, don't they, gambling sort of casino before the thing, it's very reminiscent of Skyfall. And even the way things happen, obviously the fighting's not the same.
Are you sure it's not Casino Royale?
No, there's a bit in Skyfall where he goes to like a Japanese thing, because he ends up fighting two guys with a Komodo dragon, James Bond. So it's like it's definitely Skyfall, honestly. But it just reminded me of that. But what I have a massive problem with is I just thought he was totally miscast Martin Freeman. That American accent, I'm not happy about that one bit. I'll be honest with you. I really struggled with that.
I think the problem is, it's Tim from The Office, isn't it?
That's what I thought. That's exactly what I thought, yeah.
And I don't know. So he does play a character that's fairly prominent in the Black Panther comics. So it's not someone they've made up for the movie. And what Marvel Studios seem to do a good job of is taking the essence of characters. So not keeping everything exactly the same, but taking the essence of a character and bringing that onto the screen. And I've got to agree with you there. I wish they'd have just let Martin Freeman be English. If they're going to cast him as that, then let him be English. Again, he'd been in Civil War, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Beforehand. But no, I can't disagree with that. I think he does a great, maybe not a great, I think he does a convincing American accent, so if I didn't see him and I shut my eyes and I didn't think Tim from The Office, he might be able to get away with it. I think he does a good sort of Michigan accent, doesn't he, if you've watched the first season of Fargo. But yeah, it did grate on me a little bit, that as well.
Yeah, and I think, obviously we both mentioned this at the start. We're massive fans of Ricky Gervais, The Office. For anyone from the UK, you'll understand where we're coming from. You've seen him in it, and obviously from there he's done all sorts of different films. He's been a major star in a lot of stuff. So it's not that. I just felt, and I know he's part of the comics, I just felt he was a pretty pointless character through the film. He was like, he's a CIA guy, and he's had run-ins and he knows the Black Panther, and he's trying to get this stuff back. But I just felt like he was just shoehorned into the film. I just couldn't understand whether he was like his agent had just got him a great gig, a good payer, and he was in there. I don't know why. I know it sounds overcritical because he's a great actor, but it just didn't sit. I know we've just said it. It just didn't sit well with me from that point. Every single scene, as you've just said, it just grated on me when he was in it. So I was thinking, there's just no reason for you to be in the film, really.
Yeah, I can see. Again, I've got kind of the comics background where he's that route into the US. So I think he's a statesman in the comics. So it wasn't a surprise for me to see him there. And again, I believe that he was this Top Gun pilot. I'm not sure I did later on in the movie.
That's what I meant. Yeah. That. And I think the thing was, it was like, even the way his character was, the way he portrayed that CIA guy, which usually most of these American sort of agents are like, absolute nutcases. They're trained in one-to-one combat. They'll throw themselves in front of bullet, which he obviously does because he gets shot in this scene, which saves that girl, and that's his way into Wakanda. And that, but I just found that he acted like he was British, but with an English accent. The way they portray a British super agent, other than James Bond in these films, is his upper crust sort of nose in the air character, and it didn't come across like he was actually American, other than the fact that he was doing an accent.
Yeah, I did like in the casino where Claw tries to give him his SoundCloud link.
Yeah, I like that.
Don't make me listen to your music.
No, I did laugh at that. Yeah. I thought that was funny, actually. Yeah, I'll give you that one. Yeah, that was good.
But no, I think I'm with you there.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, please don't. If you don't agree, don't think of me. That was just my opinion, and I thought that whole fight scene from there was brilliant. The whole thing, but it was very much. It just reminded me of Skyfall. I know. I've done a couple of comparisons today, and it just felt, because I'd sort of seen the reviews were so good, and I'd not read the spoiler reviews or anything. I'd just seen like a couple of little liners. I was expecting big things, and I was left in some of these scenes thinking I've seen all this before. But the next scene after the fight was when he was on the bonnet of the car and Shuri's drive. That was really good. That the technology for her to not to be there, getting a car. I thought that was brilliant. And with him on the bonnet of the car and the roof was fantastic. Scene when he's the Black Panther. I thought it was amazing. Yeah,
I mean, just a little bit before that. I mean, what you mentioned about Skyfall. What it reminded me of was there's a scene in Kingsman: Secret Service. It's Colin Firth in the middle of a church, and it is absolutely. In your words, taking names. It is absolutely brilliant, and the camera work and stunt work is just phenomenal. And that kind of one camera, one shoot, where it's just traveling through, and you got all these different fights going on. I just thought it was fantastic. Now, I think I'd probably still give Kingsman the edge. I don't know why. I just thought that was a little bit better, but just a phenomenal scene, and the amount of choreography and how they've glued all of that together was just amazing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I thought it was brilliant. The whole on the bonnet, on the roof, the way the Black Panther moved, I thought was ace. And then the ending bits, obviously. He gets clawed, he's going to sort of take him out, and it's like a homage to the world we live in. You're on camera. You can't just go and kill someone on camera, which I did find a bit strange. I know, obviously, the guy's responsible, isn't he responsible for his father's death, Claw? Or his father's been chasing him, for years.
Yeah, and so it was actually the other chap, wasn't it? So he'd killed, in the comics, he'd killed off T'Chaka.
Yes,
but in the cinematic universe, what they were telling us was he'd killed off what's the other character's name? The head of the Rhino tribe.
His friend.
His friend, basically. So I'll look it up shortly, but he basically killed off his dad in the cinematic universe when he's stealing. That's the one, yeah. So he killed off his dad in the cinematic universe. So again, this is a distasteful character, and he deserves everything he gets. But the people with the camera phones and everything, politically, remember this is a head of state. The Black Panther. This is not just a rogue vigilante. So he can't. You can't just knock someone off in the middle of the street there.
Yeah, and I thought that was very well done. Sort of saying, he's still a good guy. He realizes you can't just do these sort of things with the social. Even in the film like that, the social media is a big thing. There, it's like a little undertone. I thought it was a nice little message.
Yeah,
it might mean different things to different people, but to me, it did. It sort of was saying like you're not far away from a phone, even though all this stuff's going on around him. So it was a bit of a dig, really, at society.
Yeah. But then, of course, getting captured, I mean, again, I thought Andy Serkis in that interrogation room, I just thought was fantastic. Just, again, that menacing bit of crazy that he's got there. I just thought he was brilliant.
He was good, and the singing, obviously, was sort of made it in that scene. The only problem I've got, Dave, is like in any of these films, they interrogate him in some side room, and nobody thinks, I tell you what, let's put a couple of guards on a side road, the little alleyway next to the thing, and it gets obvious. I thought, we have to have artistic license, and some of these things are thin, as we've discussed over the last couple of podcasts. You do read too much into them, and from that point of view, I ended up I've probably been overcritical on this one because it's fresh in my mind from yesterday. But I just thought that bit. I thought, oh my gosh, at least let Michael B. Jordan just come and start taking everybody out or something and forces him way into rescue him. Not just the old, it's like on the Batman TV series in the 60s, the Joker comes and just like pulls a wall off and pulls the bars off a prison thing and he's escaped. And that's what it felt like. I know there's a bit of interaction with the Black Panther and he sort of takes him out with that sort of stun gun, which works against the kinetic energy. But that bit from him rescuing him from there, I just thought was a bit poor, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed it, to be honest. I mean, it was all over and done with pretty quickly, wasn't it? And I think what left me more was kind of what happened after that. So, Claw and Killmonger, seem to be paired up.
Yeah,
Killmonger's got his girlfriend who's obviously helping him out and stuff. But then we see there's a bit of a double cross there, and actually Killmonger just offs Claw
and his girlfriend
and his girlfriend. Yeah, well, yeah, it just shows you just how ruthless he is. And I think, I was going to say up until this point, but even probably beyond this point as well, I think I could kind of see where he was coming from.
Yeah.
Now his nickname's Killmonger.
It's a bit of a clue. Yeah.
So he isn't Snow White, but I just think you could empathise with what he'd been through, and where he'd got up to there. His dad had effectively been assassinated.
Yeah.
And he was denied, being part of this Disneyland, as he might think of it, this great world, this heavenly place. And he's had to live life the real hard way. So I think there was a lot in that early part of his performance, Michael B. Jordan, there that I was kind of empathising with. But yeah, in killing his girlfriend off, that was just absolutely an early signal, wasn't it, that this is a ruthless guy.
Yeah, don't mess with him sort of thing. I thought the little markings on his body was a good touch as well.
Yeah, and they nicely sort of drip fed that to us, didn't they? They sort of said, and you saw a few little cuts on his arm or little bumps on his arm, and he sort of says, "I've got one of these for each one of my kills." And when he takes off his jacket later in the ceremonial fight, then you see actually his body is absolutely full, and each one of these little bumps corresponds to a kill that he's got.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. And they said that, didn't they? There's one little line where they're talking about him saying that he killed people like he's playing a video game. And I thought that was a nice little line. That's obviously someone who's into his video games and stuff. It's a nice, but it sort of solidified that position because, you're sort of thinking, there's no way he would have been in the army and killed that many people. But then when his file, they're actually saying it, I thought that justified the markings on his body very, very well because he was like this elite killer. He wasn't just a soldier. And no disrespect to soldiers or Marines. He was like a different level up from them because he was driven by hate sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. I did think that was a nice little touch to sort of make it. Because what I found, Dave, I don't know about you, is up to that point when he'd done the scene in the museum and even when he'd rescued Claw, he just looked like a normal sort of bad guy. He didn't look like he had something. But then from that scene on, when he killed Claw, he seemed to grow a couple of inches. And he looks like really, really imposing then. Whereas when he was in the museum, he just looked like some tourist. Obviously, that was what he was going for, the geeky tourist who's coming looking at artifacts and stuff. But I thought that transition to that was very, very good. He became such a strong bad guy from that point, I think. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, he's another specimen, isn't he?
Oh, gosh, yeah. You won't mess with him. Yeah.
Not at all.
He's a big bloke. Big bloke.
I think I was surprised when they killed off Claw. And it reminded me a little bit of kind of some of the Netflix series where they throw in something shocking around the middle of the series and killing one of those, the main villains off. I was definitely surprised by, but then you sort of see, don't you, what the actual plan is.
Yeah, all along it's been that.
He rocks up in Wakanda, and sure enough, he's like, I've got Claw, this guy you've been trying to find, and the previous Black Panther had failed to actually bring to justice.
Yeah.
Here he is, and of course I don't know whether it was luck or judgment, but he just happens to stumble across the Rhino sort of tribe who have obviously got a big beef with Claw, and so he gets them on side straight away.
Yeah, and then he quite well acted, to be fair, because it's one of these ones where the head of the Rhino tribe's there, and he's had his issues, and he's been asking the Black Panther to sort of get a bit more dominant and let people understand what we're about and that. And he says, Dunny, early on in the film, like, that's not what we're about. We don't want to be taking over and going into war with people. Yeah. And he just comes in and literally within a couple of sentences, he's challenging for the title, shall we say, Rocky style. And he's done a good PR job really on them, because it turns a lot of the tribes who are obviously a bit discontent, who've obviously got this sort of, not savage, but they've got this understanding of like the oppressed, and they want to show people what they're about, and instead of just staying in the shadows. So I thought that was really well done, even the point where he challenges the Black Panther, for the title sort of thing.
Title.
Oh, the king. It's like Rocky is coming over. It's the Creed side of it coming out. But no, for it to be the king, basically, like he does earlier in the film with Ibaka as well. So I thought that was good. And I thought the scene, because it did happen quickly. And obviously Forrest Whitaker's a pivotal point in that whole scene, because it was him who was being protected by, what's he called? T'Challa. T'Chaka. He's been protected, isn't he? Obviously, and that's the whole point why his father's died. So I think that was a great scene. And then the actual giving up his powers, I sort of knew what was going to happen. I knew it was very much Rocky 3, Mr. T job. He's got in there, not cocky, but he thought he was just going to wipe the floor with him, and he's just come and took him out straight away, and he then becomes the king. I thought that whole thing wasn't done quickly. I think it had to be done in that time, because it could have dragged on too much of him being a bit too sinister. But I thought it couldn't go any other way than him actually kicking his backside.
Yeah.
Which he obviously did.
And I thought it was kind of interesting, wasn't it? Because we saw with the previous fight with the man ape, we saw that Wakanda's it's a kingdom, but it's kind of democratic as well. So all the different tribes or the head of the tribes or whatever can challenge for the kingdom. But actually, when you've got this cheeky little upstart, this outsider, but he's not really an outsider. He just ended up on the outside of the gates.
Yeah.
And when he comes in, it's like, no, he can't challenge. So there was, going from that democratic position to actually, no, we want to hold on to power. I thought that was, I don't know whether that was an intentional thing, but it was something that I noticed that, seemed a bit, probably not strange. Probably if you were the people in power, you would want to hold on to it, but they'd made such a thing about how democratic it was, and then it seemed to not be when it wasn't convenient.
Yeah, and I suppose, like you say, it's the artistic license to let the story flow. I suppose it's got to be some sort of rationale to it, I suppose. But I mean, I didn't really think of it like that, to be fair. I know I've been a bit critical at some of the scenes so far, but I think it made sense to do what he was doing, and I must admit, I'll tell you who played quite a good part but didn't really speak a lot, was the guy who had the things in his ears and his tongue, because he was just like, it was a very, very good part. He didn't say a lot, obviously, because it's part of like the traditional sort of African makeup of that.
The guy with the plate in his lip.
And obviously.
The tribe.
Yeah, and he sort of agrees with them challenging T'Challa for the title by not really saying much, but it just seemed to make sense what was going on. So I thought that whole thing was really good. That whole sort of fight scene and him sort of losing his to be king and that sort of the redemption thing. I thought that was really good. And the one scene that come from that, Dave, which was interesting, was when he picks that woman up, because they're obviously with them herbs at the farming them and that, and she says says to Michael B. Jordan, we're keeping these for kings in the future and that, and he's like, burn everything, and then all of a sudden you realise that people are like, we've made a mistake here, and this is where this guy's just going to send them into all sorts of wars and stuff. And I thought that whole thing was really good. I think he had to do something like that, like you said, to solidify who he was. He's not just going to be someone who's just going to, now he's in power, he's just going to turn and stuff. He's going to stay as horrible and as ruthless as he can.
Yeah, and I think up until that point, like I say, it seems ridiculous, but, even shooting his girlfriend didn't quite solidify it as much as that scene when he's just like, burn it all, at that point. Because I guess, then he's keeping with the Rocky theme, he's the challenger, isn't he? He's trying to get to the top. But then once he's got to the top, he wants to make sure there are no other Black Panthers at all. He's had the last heart-shaped herb.
Yeah.
And, there can't be any others. So burn it all and we're going to wage war on the world. And you're thinking, uh-oh.
Yeah. This has took a sinister turn.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, Dave. The next scene, I could have written this one with my eyes closed, was obviously T'Challa's mum, the sister, his girlfriend. They all go, they take some of the herbs, the last sort of remaining herb before he burns everything, and they go to M'Baku to try and get him to help with the herb in hope of giving it him so he can challenge Michael B. Jordan's character to becoming the king, as he done earlier in the film. And there's a bit of dialogue, and I must admit, he was very, very funny, actually. I thought there was a couple of one-liners there from M'Baku. It was really clever, what he'd said. And then, obviously, they find that they've rescued T'Challa. They found him when they were fishing, and just coincidentally, he's there, safe. Well, not what he say well, but he's safe. And
buried in the snow.
Yeah, buried in the snow, and they like rescuing him. There was one scene there after when they were sort of bringing him back to life with the herb, which I thought was brilliant. There's this deep and meaningful conversation between the mum, the sister. They're all there sort of praying and chanting, and then he just turns around when he comes back to life, Black Panther, and M'Baku goes, hello, are you finished? Like he's
yeah.
To them it's the biggest thing in their life at that time, trying to resurrect the king and everything, and he's just sat there bored, like, right, are we done now? I thought that was almost like Tony Stark level of funniness, like real stupid one-liner, but it had, like, me and Sam, we were absolutely laughing in the cinema at that. I thought it was really well put together, that line.
I thought, when we see him at the start of the movie, and he's challenging for the kingdom, he just comes across as a big thug, doesn't he? But when we see him in this later part, I thought he was brilliant from the moment he was on screen. And you have Martin Freeman, he's trying to get a word in, and then this is the guerrilla tribe, so they're just giving it the old oh. Just, shut up.
Yeah, what do you know, Tim? Just be quiet there.
Yeah. No, he was really good. In that second part.
And obviously from there, it leads into the big battle. He's sending off these different vehicles into different quarters of the world into battle. And we get that, obviously, the Black Panther is resurrected. And he comes on like a cliff face, doesn't he, really? He sort of, he takes one of the ships down, and then the army's there looking, and Michael B. Jordan's there, obviously looking over the top, and then it comes like that. He's still alive, and his guards, the women, are saying, like, he didn't finish the job of becoming king because he's not dead or whatever. Yeah. And then we get, and I must admit, Dave, I thought the battle was outstanding at this point. This big battle set piece was just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, they just keep getting better and better, don't they? Last week we were talking about how great the battle was with Superman and Zod, Ursa and Nom. not. This is not really comparable, is it?
No. It's like Bob the Builder's having a fight with someone, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense, does it really? And you're right, and to mark it in comparison, but obviously you can only go off when it was set, when it was, and stuff like that.
It's a different yardstick, isn't it? We're grading on a curve, as the Americans would say.
Yeah, and I get that.
But yeah, I mean, what can you say about that fight scene? I mean, again, I thought the women were really prominent in the battle.
His sister was brilliant. His sister and his
Okai.
Yeah, really, really good in that scene, and really prominent because obviously Nakia, is it Nakia? Nakia, who's obviously his girlfriend, his love interest. She's always saying that she's a spy. She's not really a warrior, but that's when she comes into her own as an actual warrior, and you can see that she gives as good as obviously his sort of henchwomen, the Black Panther, and she really does give Michael B. Jordan a proper going over in that fight with his sister. Really, really, because they've obviously not got the herb or anything, but they've got the technology to sort of put in as much as they can with Killmonger. So I thought it was a really good scene, and it all led to obviously the resurrection of the Black Panther, and from there, I mean, I loved it when the rhinos come in. That was really, really good because they just look so powerful.
Yeah,
it was a cracking fight,
and I think the only thing that I just kind of forgot that Wakabi and Akai were together.
Yeah.
So when the rhino's charging at Akai, and then it stops and gives her a lick. It's like, why would it? Oh yeah, they were together, weren't they?
Yeah,
because we got a couple of hints at it, but they didn't. It wasn't a big part of the story, and in the heat of battle, I just kind of forgot that they were together, to be honest.
Yeah, I did because he says she says, doesn't she, earlier on when she's on like that. They have a wristband, don't they, where obviously it comes up like a hologram, and she says "my love," doesn't she, at one point? That's the only real reference. But I thought it was clever. But again, I must admit that scene did verge into the Lois Lane on a lift situation, because the way that Rhino turned on a dime was unbelievable, or stopped on a dime was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was pretty good, wasn't it?
It was pretty good technology anyway, what they could do. But no, I thought that was quite funny when it licked her as well, because it was like a bit of compassion. And I think as well, by doing that, it killed the whole battle scene by not making anybody stronger or weaker. Obviously, he took a knee out of respect, because obviously it was his girlfriend or his wife.
Yeah.
But it didn't really make them weaker or anything, which obviously at some point they may be used in other films. So I was happy with the way that scene ended, and obviously from there we carried, by this time obviously the Black Panther's fighting Killmonger then, so it's all bets are off then. It's all sort of underground where the train thing is. Yeah,
and we got a hint earlier, hadn't we, that the vibranium's very unstable, so this kind of train, this light mechanism helps make it more stable, basically. So we thought, you haven't said that for no reason. That's going to come in handy at some point later, isn't it? And sure enough, so the pair of them battle it off in the end there, and T'Challa wins out after a bit of fisticuffs.
Yeah, and I think as well is you in some respects, because of what's happened, because you do see when Killmonger becomes king, you do see him take the herb and he's crying to his dad and stuff, as if there is that compassion there. And you're sort of hoping in some respects, once they fought, that he may turn, because he'd be a good adversary for the Black Panther. But obviously he's gone too far by this time. He obviously takes him to the sunset. There's a bit of dialogue. He sticks a knife in, basically saying he doesn't want to give up his beliefs in what he believes in, and that's him gone. We have a bit of compassion from Black Panther, who sort of lays his legs out flat, folds his hands in the salute. I thought that was quite a nice little touch. It showed as much as they were sort of arch enemies there, they still lack compassion, because he's his cousin at the end of the day, and
I think it was, obviously he's his cousin.
Yeah.
And I mentioned before, the scene where he has a vision and he sees T'Chaka and he's got his dad up on a pedestal there. I think this is part of the Black Panther's journey, isn't it? Part of his growth, that he can kind of empathize with Killmonger's position, and he can kind of see, he doesn't agree with his methods, of course. And I must admit, even, all the terrible things that Killmonger's done up until this point, I don't know why, because I'm not sure he was redeemable, but I'm still thinking, actually, could he be redeemable? If he sort of pulls through. We saw Martin Freeman, was on death's door. He was walking around, pretty soon after his shot. Yeah. So I thought they could have still saved him, but it was Killmonger's choice to sort of end it there.
Yeah, and I suppose in that respect, it sort of puts a full stop on the origin of the film, and it'll lead obviously into the next Avengers and that, because if you've got something sort of open-ended and that character of Killmonger's not brought into these films and that, then it doesn't really make much sense to have him still alive. So I suppose he was a great character, but for me, I was happy with the way that ended, really.
So the next steps, Killmonger's had a big influence on, hasn't it? So going from putting his dad up on a pedestal, realizing what his dad's done, realizing that he's human, he makes mistakes, but he's put this young kid in a pretty terrible position, and a lot of what had happened, was due to Wakanda being very insular, and very good at looking after their own people, but actually they could have a much broader influence over the whole world. And so we kind of get into that, don't we? We have a little bit of a Tony Stark, I am Iron Man moment where T'Challa announces that, Wakanda's going to basically open the doors and start getting more involved in world politics.
Yeah. And it was a Tony Stark job. I must admit, the whole ending from that, I love the little scene where he buys the apartment blocks and stuff, and his sister says, "I thought you were going to take me to Coachella." I thought the whole thing, and that last scene with that kid saying, they would say like, we can scrap this and sell it, sort of thing. I just thought that was the little one-liners were really, really funny. And then obviously he says to him, doesn't he, "Who are you?" And he's obviously going to say, "I am the point." It goes off before he even speaks. So I was happy with the way it ended. I thought it was a great little scene, and it just gave that bit of humour to it all.
It seems to be a Marvel nod, that now, doesn't it? Where they leave us hanging on that.
Yeah.
Which one was it? Age of Ultron? Where they're sort of saying, you're just waiting for him to go, "Avengers Assemble," or something like that. The film just cuts. Right, that's it. Get out.
See ya. Yeah. And you know what, as well, Dave? We got the two cut scenes. I only watched one of them. I thought there was only one scene. I didn't see the second one.
Oh man!
I don't know exactly what it is. I've just read about it, but
right.
Run us through it, Dave. Run me through it, because I missed it.
Yeah, I think so we were hinted at something, and I've got to admit, I had completely forgotten about this from Civil War. So when Martin Freeman comes in, there's a hint that this has happened before. And I'd forgot that at the end of Civil War, in one of the end credit scenes, you get the Winter Soldier. So obviously he's had his programming. He's a stand-up bloke normally, but you say a few keywords and he's this Russian assassin.
Yeah.
So they dropped him off to be fixed basically at the end of Civil War. And so what you see is it's only a short scene, but you've got plenty of kids around. You've got this open hut in Wakanda. So there being kids around, it's obviously a safe environment. So you can tell things are okay, and then you just get the Winter Soldier stepping out there, old Bucky Barnes, and he's still got his arm missing, and he has a bit of an exchange with Shuri, so she's obviously been looking after him, and it's just setting us nicely up for Infinity War.
Yeah, which is good, really good. Now, are you happy to go into the review scores now, Dave?
Yeah, let's do it. do you want to go first, or do you want?
Yeah. I've got a little quick summary. So I wrote down before. Now, going off the new scoring system, what I thought I enjoyed the film. I didn't think it was as good as 4, because I think 4 Ragnarok is becoming one of my favourites that I've watched over the last couple of years. It really, really enjoyed that a few months ago. Obviously, we haven't reviewed that together, but it's something that I'm using as a yardstick from my own sort of personal taste. Slightly different tone. I thought the dialogue in this was great. I thought the main character was brilliant. The Black Panther, really, really well acted. His emotions, everything. It wasn't as heavily reliant on the CGI as a lot of these other sort of superhero films. And I find that the origin ones aren't. The origin ones, I even like the Wolverine and things like that. There is a lot of dialogue to sort of build the character up so you believe in who he is. So I thought it was a great film. Sister Soul show. Sure, he was the best character in the whole film, without a doubt. There was some proper laugh out loud scenes, but I can't get past Martin Freeman. I just thought he was another one of these throwaway characters, and I understand the story arc and the comics, as you've said. It just wasn't believable that he was a CIA agent. I don't know why. It just didn't, and maybe that is my bias towards 15 years ago watching The Office. I don't know, but it was a real standout. Sore fun for me. So for that reason, Dave, and I know that's not really something to mind, I'm giving it a Hall of Justice 3 out of 5.
Oh, crikey.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm impressed you remembered.
I've written it down.
Oh, right, you probably...
As you were saying it, I'm writing it down.
Right. Oh, Justice, let's get that one down. Yeah, I mean, it seems a little bit harsh, I would say, that, to judge Martin Freeman, but I know exactly what you mean. I mean, it's like if you had, I don't know, Ricky Moranis in that role. It just wouldn't fit, would he, for that
No.
hard kind of CIA type character. So I know what you mean there. But very good, very good. So right in the middle of that. Yeah. So for me, I went in with high expectations, but I tried to bring those back, because whenever you go in with ridiculous expectations, it's very rare that they're actually going to be met and exceeded. And I just think, particularly in the Marvel universe, the cinematic universe, they just keep pushing the boundaries out. And they just keep getting better with the effects, with the storytelling. I think the thing that they do well, they balance the humor and the action. For me, it's not slapstick and silly kind of humor, but it is funny. And as opposed to if you go across maybe to the Scott Snyderverse, where everything's super, super serious. So for me, I really enjoyed it. I don't know where I would rank it in terms of the overall Marvel movies. I think there's been so many great ones now.
Yeah.
So I think it's up there. It's probably not the favorite for me, but I'm going to go straight in there. I'm going to go straight to Asgard.
Oh my word!
For me, I think it's right up there. Again, I think I'd heard, comparisons with Winter Soldier, which I'd probably have up there as well. I don't know which one's the better. But in terms of just building that world, because in Civil War, we didn't really know that much. So we knew vibranium. Yeah. And we kind of knew that was very strong metal and whatever, and very well sought after. But we didn't know a lot about Wakanda. And so to build that world, to have all of those African influences and create this new country, essentially, with all these futuristic elements as well, I just thought it was brilliant. And like I say, with some of the female characters coming in and being so prominent as well, because the movie's Black Panther, but actually it's like Black Panther plus Entourage, isn't it? They were so strong there. And I think in the Marvel universe, there hasn't been too many really strong female characters. And so,
no,
I'm having it right up there.
No, hey, Dave, I had last week. I respect that. I can totally understand it. I think I just didn't feel it as much as I thought I would. And I thought going in blind with not knowing anything about the origins and not reading any of the comic book stuff, I thought it would help me. And I agree with you, they painted a great picture of the whole country, the where they were, why they had to hide, and that great. And to do it in such a short space of time is really good. So I totally respect that. I just thought some of it was a bit cliched, and I had a bit of the problem with some of the dialogue. I know not just because of Martin Freeman, but he was one of the main things that just grated on me every time he was on the screen. And like I said before, so no, I respect that, Dave. So at least we've both given a 5 out of 5, one way or the other. Mine was last week, yours was this week. So I will give it another watch, though, Dave. I would like to watch it again when it becomes available. I probably won't go see it in the cinema, and then see just a quick segment what I think of it on a second viewing, because a lot of the time you do miss a lot of things. And I do think, I don't know about you, but because we're doing a podcast now where we're reviewing this media, I was probably looking for stuff that I wouldn't have even noticed if we weren't doing, if that makes sense. It seemed to, not trying to make mistakes or find mistakes, but I was overly critical probably on some of the stuff that I'd seen, but I just couldn't get past him, unfortunately. So anyway, I'll be here all night talking about that.
I think it's difficult as well, isn't it? Because even if you've stayed away from the story, not read any reviews, it's impossible to avoid the hype.
Yes.
And so you're always a little bit, you just can't avoid hearing something about whether it's an absolute turkey or whether it's the best film that's ever been, and usually it's never one of those extremes. But I remember Blair Witch Project. That, for me, that is probably the most extreme, where I just went in with such high expectations, and then I watched it, and I'm like, "What the hell's this?" Yeah. And I can kind of get that. If you watch that movie with knowing nothing about it, not understanding any hype or whatever, it would be quite radical and something you haven't seen before. So you'd probably be raving about it.
Yeah.
But to me, as someone who'd heard all the hype and was expecting big things, I thought it was awful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's like anything. Everyone has your own taste, don't you? So it's great that we've both come up with different scores, and it's totally justifiable in what both scores are. So I'm happy with that. I think now, Dave, leading on there, obviously, we'll sort of discuss ourselves away from the podcast, what we're going to review for next week. But have you got any shameless plugs that you'd like to get in before we finish?
Yep. So shameless plug from me is the Grassroots Coachcast. So we've just released episode 7. We had a guest coach, chap called Dean Martin, not of jazz singer fame, but another Dean Martin, who actually came in and just spoke to us about his journey, and it was really interesting because he'd gone from being a kind of shouty vocal parent from the sidelines type of person, and then he kind of grew as a coach to where he's much more supportive. Lays on great coaching sessions, and so we've just released that. So if you want to head over and give that a listen, so that's Grassroots Coachcast. If you want to get us on Twitter, you can get us at grootscoachcast, or you can email the show at grassrootscoachcast@gmail.com. And Chris, you got any shameless plugs for us?
Oh, I've always got shameless plugs, Dave. Don't worry about that. Obviously, I have my own podcast as well. It's a contextual podcast. You can find me on Twitter at contextualpod1. I've just slightly tweaked the one. It was Contextual World, but I've changed it now so it's relevant to the podcast. On YouTube, it's the Contextual Podcast. Facebook, exactly the same. There's plenty of videos going up. This week, I've done 2 podcasts. Standard stuff with Steve-O, talking gaming and other nonsense. And then I had a guest on Friday, a gentleman called Bibinio who follows my podcast, has done, and I've actually inspired him to do his own sort of podcast video cast. So it was great. The only problem was he was a City fan who dropped in a couple of City gags that I didn't realise until I was halfway through the podcast. So I'm going on his podcast in a few weeks. So I'll be dropping some United stuff. So yeah. But also, anybody who's listening, if you want to get, as Dave says, and he's right, we love the 5-star reviews. Get reviewing the podcast. It helps us get noticed. Drop us an email at comicsinmotionpodcast@gmail.com if you've got any questions or anything you want us to review in the future. We're always open for ideas.
And also you can get us on Twitter at comicsinmotionp. And so have a look out. So what we'll do is once we've published the show, we'll go back, and if we've pulled out some interesting little facts there, we'll be tweeting those each day. So have a look out for those.
But with the fun facts will go up daily with a little snippet. Some of what we've discussed, some that you might not know about, but get involved and give us a follow and a shout out.
Yeah.
Right, well, this has been episode 3 of the Comics in Motion podcast. Just want to thank all of you for listening again, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Don't freeze. I never freeze. Why don't you ask him